I think we can start. Hello, welcome everybody. Oh. Yes. Oh, here I am. So I'm Claudia Brunkart and I'm the project coordinator at Journalist Fund. So welcome at our panel Cross-Border Investigation in Europe. So together here I'm with Stella, Chloe and Ula. So this panel will be led by them. So Chloe explored the problem of the Mediterranean Sea, which is the flashpoint of the climate crisis. Stella specializes in global warming disinformation and climate change history, and Ula investigates social term and migrations. So during the panel, they will tell us how they conducted the investigation, how they carried. They will tell us about the biggest issue, problem, and what exactly investigative journalism entails. So before that, I would like to point out that all these brilliant investigations were developed with the support of the Journalism Fund. So Journalist Fund is a non-profit Belgian organization, and our main role is to facilitating the investigative journalism by bringing donors and journalists together in order to facilitate the democracy. So how we are doing that? We have 7 different grant programs. So each grant program have different rules, different deadlines, and different specificity and terms. So if, for example, you would like to conduct the investigation in Europe, we have the cross-border grants. So at least you should be 2 journalists from 2 different countries, and if you would like to explore like a migration issue related to Europe, then you are most welcome to apply for this program. We have also modern slavery program. We have earth investigation program. So if you would like to conduct the investigation related to the environmental issue in Europe, then you can apply, for example, for this program. We have also cross-border local grants program and so go. So I won't talk about all our 7 programs because it will take way too much. If, for example, you have idea, you would like to conduct the investigation, but you don't have the teammate, that's something under this link you will be able to find the partner from, for example, another country. The same for some issue directly which you can face under your investigation. So we are working with the pool of mentors. If during your investigation we will face some problem with, I don't know, ethics or visualization, that's something we could help you with as well. So right now I will leave the floor for Chloe first. She will talk us about her investigation, the biggest problem and issue she faced. Yes, here are Chloe.
Dear colleagues, thank you for coming to this panel composed by only women. I'm delighted to be here with you at the first edition of the European Journalism Symposium. I am even more delighted to be here in Brussels, the heart of the European Union. Before starting, first, I would like to thank Claudia and Journalism Fund for giving me the opportunity to present our investigation, Lucifer's Spell. Also, your financial support has been a great help to us. Without it, our project would not have happened. So for 6 months, from December 2021 to May 2022, with the participation of journalists across the Mediterranean, we investigated on the deadly wildfires that affected southern Europe during the summer of 2021. Just to situate them, they took place in Spain in the province of Avila, in Italy in Sardinia, in Greece in the Evia region, in Cyprus in the Arakapas region between Limassol and Larnaca district at the south of Cyprus. So the investigation was conducted by Maria Alvarez del Valle for Silvio, Davide Mancini for Vox Europe, Elvira Crizari and Janine Luludi for Mir and Efemerida Tonsintarton newspaper, and by me for the Cypriot newspaper Philaeleftheros. Thanks to Davide Mancini and the great network that the European media Vox Europe provides, we were able to form a team. We weren't all environmental experts. Personally, it was my first environmental subject I was working on, so it was a real challenge for me. So how did we proceed? Basically, we wanted to find a common angle, similar patterns. Why are the countries of the South more prone to wildfires compared to northern countries? So we immediately understood that we couldn't just stop at the climate change itself, even if it's indeed a major cause, but we focused on other factors such as the depopulation, which combined with the climate change are creating mega fires, and that was our final finding. So in order to find a common angle, our methodology was to collect data on our respective countries on previous fires and wildfires, such as where the fires took place, which communities were affected, the location, and the number of hectares burned over the last 10 years for each country, Spain, Italy, Greece, and Cyprus. At first, our hypothesis was that the depopulation trend on small communities due to previous fires was a consequence of wildfires. However, we faced some difficulties to prove that because of the lack of data in each country about wildfires, depopulation, local GDP, and tourism trend at town level. On the other hand, the IPCC suggests that the population is the cause of wildfires. So from this observation, we then discussed about the problematic in the case of Spain and Italy for small municipalities managing large forested areas that often do not have the capacity for a proper forest management. And it turned out that it was also the case in Cyprus and in Greece. So once the characters of our stories have been identified, we defined together common questions on the field to the authorities responsible for forested areas, mayors, local farmers, victims of fires. So for our stories, when we visited the burn sites a year later, we could see the bare hills, the burned trees, trunks, and skeletons of millennial olive trees in Italy as in Cyprus. We discovered agricultural communities already weakened, who have lost half of their agricultural activities and especially isolated from state decision-making regarding fire prevention. So you have to know that most of the Mediterranean lands have been agroforestry, especially agricultural, and the fact of this abandonment by agriculture, as well as by the population itself, mean that the forests have occupied this space. In the past, in the Mediterranean areas, these farmlands functions as fire protection areas, and any fires that occurred would extinguish themselves. So I take here the concrete example of Aracapas in Cyprus. It is a small village of 160 inhabitants, whereas 30 years ago the population was more than 500. Images from the Copernicus system, a European satellite data collecting program, show the expansion of forest vegetation between the years 2000 and 2018 in the Aracapas area, reaching the limits of the village. As a small village, Aracapas did not have the financial means to take care of cutting vegetation conducive to fires. Unfortunately, with the heat wave, the fire has spread in the surrounding villages, burning 10,150 hectares. So with this investigation, not only we were able to find failures at local and regional level regarding the prevention, we also found out that in the 2014 to 2020 period, only 49% of the funds available for forest measures were used by member states, amounting to 4 billion euro. So Spain and Italy benefited the most from this fund, while Cyprus is at the bottom of the ranking, which is alarming given the climate crisis we are going through. Not to mention the late French President Jacques Chirac with his famous sentence at the Johannesburg Earth Summit in 2002, our house is burning and we are looking as well. So we also collecting moving stories of farmers trying to revive their cultivation from the ashes, like Kostas Himonas, the beekeeper in Cyprus, who lost at least 1,000 hives in the fires, and who now has to wait 4 years for his region to produce honey again. Or the priest, like Father Andreas, who has to feed a family of 10 children and who has to start his mandarin plantations from scratch. And of course, we do not forget the 4 Egyptian migrants who worked in agriculture and who perished in the flames in Cyprus. The fact that we were several journalists on this investigation and that we cross-referenced our results throughout the investigation allowed us to find a common problematic within Southern Europe. It wouldn't have been the case if we had written an article each on our own individually. Since it was an environmental subject, we modeled our stories based on the scientific discourse to secure our information, and in our investigation we gave very concrete examples that supported the statements of the experts. Finally, I believe that EU-wide cross-border investigations have an even more impact as the articles are published in different medias all over Europe and several languages. Kudos to Vox Europe for their remarkable network of translators. In terms of impact, our investigation targeted approximately millions of readers. That's why I believe we need a strong European journalism more than ever. Thank you.
All right. So it was Chloe. Right now, we leave the stage for Stella.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's so nice to see so many young faces here today. My name is Stella Levantesi. I'm an Italian climate journalist and author, and I freelance, but I collaborate with different media in Italy and internationally as well. The name of our investigation is How the Gas Lobby Aims to Lock in Europe's Fossil Fuel Addiction, and I'm working on this project with my colleague Phoebe Cook, who's a climate reporter at the outlet DSMOG, which specializes in climate investigations. I personally cover, yes, the climate crisis, but more specifically climate change disinformation, denial, delay, corporate responsibility, and fossil fuel lobbying, and all those not particularly pleasant issues. Our investigation is an ongoing project. We only started a couple of months ago. So I'm going to sort of talk about what we've been doing up to now. And it starts from a basic premise, that is that since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, European governments have been scrambling to find alternate gas supplies, and especially those countries that have been more reliant on Russian gas, like Italy and Germany. And this is why we've chosen to focus our project, which is an investigative series, on these two countries specifically. We have been looking at how the energy crisis and the climate crisis intersect in this context, and we are examining the close ties between the gas lobbies, specifically the gas interests, and the governments in these countries, but we're also looking at how these relationships are evolving over time. And we know that governments have been bailing out energy companies, and they have been fast-tracking things like liquefied natural gas or LNG terminals, and that fossil gas is gaining a new status as a necessary fuel for energy security. This is the message that these gas interests are trying to send. And it has also been falsely promoted as a green fuel and as a clean fuel and as a solution to the climate crisis. So there's a lot of greenwashing going on as well. And we were actually at COP27 last week in Egypt, which is the annual global climate conference. And it was very obvious even then even in that context, how these gas interests were really pushing this narrative of gas as a clean fuel and as necessary to the energy transition. Our series examines whether there is a coordinated, broader push to exploit the current crisis and lock in gas for the long term. And we've also been looking at what actors are involved, how they're doing this, and why, of course. Our work is looking at messaging by the gas lobby and specific instances of how this also interacts with finance and politics in both Germany and Italy. And, we know that a lot of climate campaigners and experts have acknowledged the need for companies to provide alternative gas supplies to keep people warm and fed, especially through the winter, but only as a short-term solution. And we found that this isn't really happening, that in fact there is an effort to lock in gas for the long term, to maintain gas production and consumption as well. We have been looking at as I said, the situation in two countries, Italy and Germany, and we published our first story in September in the wake of the Italian national snap election. The headline of our first story, which was published on Die Morgen with the support of the Journalism Fund, which we thank very much. The headline was, "Italy's lurch to the right raises risk of fossil gas lock-in." And at the time, the right-wing coalition was projected to win the elections. As you might know, it did. But at the same time, the younger generation, activists, members of the civil society and environmental organizations have really been calling for a rapid phase-out of fossil fuels, which in fact is not happening. Italy is going in the opposite direction. Both the last government and the new government have been focusing on approving, investing in, and opening new gas import terminals, those LNG terminals that I was talking about before. And at the same time, there's also a complete lack of discussion on effective climate policies that could be undertaken. I want to stress that while we were working on this first article, Italy, it was the end of the summer, September. Italy was experiencing one of the worst drought of the past 70 years. And even before voting day, less than 10 days before, the eastern region of Italy, Marche, was drenched with 400 millimeters of rain, which is an amount that would usually fall over 6 months. And at least 10 people were killed. So even as the country was experiencing extreme weather and has been experiencing extreme weather and the effects of the climate crisis, there still was a very strong push to keep expanding gas in the country, both at the industry level and at the political level. We reported then that if Giorgia Meloni, which is the leader of the far-right Brothers of Italy party, were to win the election, which again she in fact did, and formed a coalition of right-wing parties, then the gas lobby, which in Italy has been long enjoying a close relationship with the Italian state, may find it even easier to sidestep scrutiny. And we found that the greater influence of the gas lobby in Italy could have implications that go far beyond the country. Also because a lot of these gas actors, fossil fuel companies like Eni, pipeline operators, NAM, and other actors that are in the context of the gas industry in Italy, have been acting at the European level as well. We in fact found that some of these actors have been lobbying the EU to back new fossil gas projects, while at the same time opposing policies to limit demand. We have also found that this is happening in Germany with similar dynamics, but obviously it is a different socio-political context, so there are many differences. We are working now on the article. My colleague Phoebe has traveled to Germany to sort of do more hands-on reporting on this story, which we're aiming to publish soon, and hopefully you'll be able to read more when it comes out. But I'll just say 2 words on it without getting too much into detail, because it's quite interesting how this situation of gas lobbying is working commonly in different countries. So the gas lobby has capitalized on the Ukraine war to plug Germany into a fast-expanding LNG business. And even in Germany, the government has been lauding LNG as essential to energy security. And like in Italy, new data has been pointing to increased levels of interaction between the state and the industry. The main problem is that these new gas projects will lock countries into long-term dependence on fossil gas. And the other issue is that experts have been underlying how these projects have a very high risk of becoming, in fact, stranded assets. They are also being funded publicly by subsidies, and taxpayer money is going into these projects. We've been looking at how these Italian and German actors have been behaving beyond European borders as well. And it was quite obvious last week at COP27 as well how these companies have been acting in Africa to secure new gas sources of natural gas in the wake of the Ukraine invasion. And German and Italian governments and companies have been scouring Africa for these alternatives. We know that German Chancellor Scholz visited Senegal in May to back the development of a gas field, which is due to go on stream in 2023. We know that Italy has struck deals with Angola, Algeria, and the Republic of Congo. And we know that at least 5 of the 9 gas deals that have been struck on the sidelines of COP were also involving Africa. So there is a broad push to what is being referred to as the European dash for gas in Africa. Basically, these companies and governments looking to exploit resources in Africa and looking to expand gas projects and create new gas projects as well, and create a sort of a new export market to then pull in gas into Europe from Africa. Again, even in the context of COP and in the context of some European countries, there is a broader push by the gas industry, the European gas industry, to portray gas as a clean fuel, falsely portray gas as a clean fuel. So there is also here a lot of greenwashing involved. And one of the risks is that these gas investments in Africa will in fact hinder Africa's chances of leapfrogging into developing renewables rapidly. Other big issues that have to do with gas projects also include, pipelines and polluting infrastructure, which damages health, livelihood, which displaces communities, and destroys wildlife. It is important to stress also that this new surge in gas and LNG specifically, but not only, also contradicts what climate experts have been saying about gas, which is that it is not compatible with the climate targets to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And we have found a common theme in our reporting, which is that the fossil fuel industry and gas interests specifically are using the current crisis, are using the energy crisis in the wake of the Ukraine war to get new infrastructure built, basically to maintain gas production and consumption and to lock in gas for decades to come, while at the same time trying to push these narratives of greenwashing that portray gas as a clean fuel and portray gas as being part of the solution to the climate crisis, which it is in fact not. So we will continue to look into this issue and exploring this intersection between the gas lobbies and climate policies in Europe. We did publish the first story in both DSMOG and an Italian outlet as well, Il Manifesto. We aim to continue doing so and to sort of broaden our reporting as well throughout other outlets in Europe. And stay tuned to see what we publish next in the next few months. Thank you very much. And thanks again to the European Journalism Fund.
All right, so it was Stella right now. Ula will tell us more about her investigation.
This one?
Mm-hmm, yes. Okay, I'll wait 2 more minutes till your secret somewhere. Sure. I'll just wait a bit till everybody's seated. Hey, so I'm Ula Idzikowska. I'm a Polish-based reporter and journalist. I've been writing mainly about migration, minorities, human rights, discrimination for past 6 years. And I will present you our project, which is still ongoing, being LGBTQI+ in the wartime. Me and my colleague, OP and photographer Marek Kowalczyk, we've been working in Ukraine for the past few months. And we are not war correspondents. We are into human stories. So while a lot of journalists were heading to the front to report there, we were looking for some underreported stories because, as a freelancer, you always have to seek for original angles, like things that don't appear in the mainstream because otherwise people will not buy your pieces, let's say, because there are a lot of correspondents already in Ukraine. So that's why we were wondering, okay, what can we do? Which stories can we tell? Because we've been to Ukraine just after the beginning of Russian invasion. Like it was third day, I think. We were actually supposed to be in India, where I was doing journalistic fellowship, sorry. But I decided to postpone this because I thought, okay, the history is happening in Ukraine. We have to be there. And already after this first time in February and March, we thought, okay, we really have to come back to keep on telling stories, human stories about people who stayed. Can I have another slide, please? Okay, and then we were obviously looking for the angle. What can we tell?
And we were really struggling and asking ourselves this question, okay, what and who is Putin actually fighting against? Because, you know, people were really shocked that it was happening. There were a lot of discussions. And then we were thinking, okay, it's not only like war with tanks and missiles and airstrikes, but it's also like kind of cultural war, because what Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, announced in the very beginning was that this is a war against Western values and gay pride parades. And it's also part of Russia's national security strategy to preserve the family and gender. That preserving the family and gender are matters of national security, and everybody who is actually different, who do not fit in our heterosexual cisgender standards, this person poses a threat to national security. So actually, queer people have been scapegoated in Russia since like 2012, 2013 with this gay propaganda, anti-gay propaganda. How is it called, of Putin? Can I have another one? And we started realizing, okay, this is like really important to talk about, because like the attention of the media, of course, is on what is going on at the front, but we wanted to tell this different story. And we only, you know, find like the confirmation that it's also about like, you know, war against freedom, free worlds, and Western values when Putin announced the annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories, when he was again like scaring people of, yeah, queer people, actually. I'll not read this. We can move to another slide. And then, of course, as I stated, I've been covering like human rights violation, like in Greece, in Malta. I've been dealing with this topic, and we see that human rights and especially rights of minorities have been diminished and more violated. So that's why I really, you know, find that we need to tell stories about that, like reminding ourselves that those rights are under threat. And we also know that Russia has been supporting European ultra-conservative groups who try to limit women's rights and LGBTQI+ rights under the disguise of protecting traditional family values. So this war, let's say, cultural war, is not only happening in Ukraine, in Russia, but in the whole of Europe, even in the rest of the world. And we also see how like Russian influence is spreading. We see that like last year, Hungary's conservative government passed a gay propaganda law very similar to Russia's, that Romania is waiving its own, and like very recently with the introduction of Lex Czarnek in Poland, so giving like controlling organs, let's say, more power, and which will be able to decide if you can, for example, talk about LGBTQI+ topics at schools. So it's happening. Yeah, and why in Ukraine? Yeah, you can go back to the Euromaidan. Yeah, because actually, why we also chose this topic, because of the rise of nationalism in Ukraine since Euromaidan. It's a very important moment for LGBTQI+ community in Ukraine, because the matter of LGBTQI+ rights was put on political agenda for the first time, because yeah, this is what the European Union asked from Ukraine. Like, look, do something with the rights of your minorities. And this is what started happening a little bit after 2015. A new law was introduced, how is it called, like labor law or something like that. Anyway, the discrimination of queer people on the work floor was forbidden. So this is what changed, and for the rest, nothing much. But the situation of the community in Ukraine has deteriorated because, like, right groups which gained like a lot of power because they were involved in because they were very active at Euromaidan and people were supporting them. They started spreading this narrative of that queer people form a threat to Ukrainian identity, which should be like more traditional, like family oriented. So we know the narrative already from Russia. And also why, sorry that I really tell you a lot of why we chose this topic, but the context is really important here. So last but not least, Ukraine is invaded. So the country is in war. That means that you have a lot of adrenaline, stress. People feel insecurity. Everybody's freaking out, basically. And with this militarization of the society, there is more risk of discriminate people who do not fit in the standard, so are not seen as Ukrainian. Yes, so like LGBTQI+ people, Roma as well. So now I will tell you more about how we did it, maybe more interesting. So we had 3 field trips to Ukraine, apart from this one in February. We went there late April to actually look for the topics, because what we had in mind was a documentary movie, and we already had a producer. So then the thing was to find protagonists. It was more difficult than we thought. Then we came back in June and August, like we were working the whole month there. And there is another field trip planned in December when we will be wrapping things up. First of all, we decided that we have to learn Ukrainian. We're both Polish, so it was easier for us, but it was really a necessary thing for this kind of topic when you're working with vulnerable groups. And we thought, okay, if we had a translator, then the whole dynamic, the intimacy, it will be, it wouldn't be the same. So we thought, okay, every day from 9 to 10:30, Bogdan had to deal with us, and he helped us a lot. And this allowed us to conduct really in-depth interviews, because we've been talking with our protagonists for hours about really intimate stuff. So, with translator, it would be totally different. And there were 2 of us already, so we thought no more people. And of course, we also conducted extensive desk research. We talked to experts who explained us, how the situation of the community was before the war, why was it like that, and what is changing, and what is not changing, and what should change. And maybe I'll explain who's on the picture as well. Can you go back? Thanks. This is Augustina, a trans woman who escaped the violence of the war from the east. I don't remember where exactly now, but she ended up in LGBTQI+ shelter in Lviv, and she actually really wanted to go to Canada, because she heard that people are very open there, and there is queer community which is really established, and that she would find people who are like her, and nobody would be like punishing her for being herself. But the problem is Augustina has male marker in her passport, so she cannot leave, because for the official, she's a man. Okay, we can go further. Okay, we started with interviewing activists. So here you see Vera Chernihina in Lviv. She escaped the war from Kharkiv, where she actually organized first Pride in 2019. It was kind of violent because like LGBTQIA plus community in Ukraine has been trying to organize Pride since 2012. Sometimes, it's the first time it didn't work out because even the organizers had to cancel it because they were security issues because like LGBTQIA plus community in Ukraine has been targeted by has been facing violence for decades already. Okay, we can go further. And here is Olena Shevchenko. She's the head of Insights. Here you can see her in like storage of humanitarian aid that the organization put up in Lviv. They were based in Kyiv before the invasion, but then they escaped. They escaped the bombing and so on. But now Olena is back in Kyiv. They are helping people, actually mostly women, because it's also organization who is fighting for women's rights in Ukraine, also an issue. And they were actually sending like really basic stuff to the cities which were bombarded and where women were stuck with kids, with elderly who couldn't move, because we would think, okay, we would also flee, but not everybody can flee, actually. No, not everybody is able to. And one of the first pieces we published was at investigative platform in Poland, Okopress. It's there's no paywall, so you can read with Google Translate. So it's actually about those two activists and and their work. During the war, how they see the future of LGBTQIA+ movement, because already experts emphasize that all the work that's been put in emancipation of the community, is like damaged, let's say, because of the violence of the war. It's a huge step back in terms of human rights. And here there is a quote of Vera. She actually became like nationalistic. She was saying that she's a nationalistic lesbian. I know that without free Ukraine, I will not have rights at all. So she was like, okay, I could flee, but I will stay because, I have to keep on fighting for LGBTQI+ rights because, okay, if I move to Belgium, okay, I can enjoy my rights, but, okay, it will not be the same. I'm Ukrainian. I want to have my rights in Ukraine because that's my country. Mm-hmm. Yes, and then through the activists who connected us with people in the shelter, we could interview people who are fleeing violence. Here you see Stanislav. He's a lawyer who escaped Kharkiv, he was really, really scared because he was already facing, like everyday discrimination, and he has never did coming out because because he was just afraid. And for example, at his job, he had to hear like homophobic comments of the colleagues, and he couldn't do anything. And yeah, he has been trying to escape Ukraine for a long time already, because he was like, okay, this is not a safe place for me. I really need to leave. He even applied for asylum in Germany, but they were like, Ukraine is a safe country. What the hell, are you asking us for? So it didn't work out, but now he's in UK. He escaped through Russia. He ended up in infiltration camp, faced a lot of intimidation, but he's safe with his boyfriend. This is still a story which I want to tell, but hasn't had a chance to visit him and his boyfriend. Okay, and here you see again Augustina and Bogdana. It's a fake name I gave her for her safety. They're in a shelter in Lviv watching anime. Bogdana escaped Kherson just in the beginning of the invasion. Yeah, if you want to know more, I will show you the stories where you can read everything. So, for example, here the story I wrote for One World. So it's about the growing. Let me have a look. What did I write?
Translate, I speak Dutch.
Yeah.
It says fear for Ukrainian LGBTQ+. For the Russians, we are not people, is the headline.
Yeah. So it's actually also about the growing violence, because when I met Olena Shevchenko, it was just 10 days after she was attacked with pepper spray. Yeah, with this thing in your face, and then she said, look, because of the militarization, the violence against the community is growing, because people feel like, okay, nobody is going to punish us anyway, there is war, people have more important stuff on their head. Yeah, we can go further. And this Polish platform on it, I described the stories of people we met in Lviv, and all the problems they were facing since the beginning of the invasion. So, for example, trans women, they weren't allowed to take the train because they were like, okay, you are men, you should stay and fight. And it's also the thing with the war, that the gender roles are being emphasized, that women are depicted as like victims, okay, who should escape with the kids, and the men should stay and fight. And then we met this couple, like at the end of our stay in June, in Chernivtsi. It's like 300 kilometers from Lviv at the border with Romania. Those two escaped Odessa, and this is a couple we wanted to make a documentary about. Because first, there was a really good vibe, they were very willing to do so. It was the end of June. And they were like, okay, we will come back in August, and then we will start doing the movie. Because the Bogdana and her boyfriend, they at the end, they didn't want to take part in the project because they just met during the war, actually, and they wanted to have their privacy, of course. And they've been living in this shelter for several months, and they wanted to move close to Kyiv, and they didn't want to be followed. But it was really like, okay, we want, but we don't want, and it was also difficulty of like gaining their trust first, and then having this relationship, and then at the end, okay, we also have to understand that we cannot, of course, force anybody. But it was a problem because, you know, it cost us a lot of time to establish the relationship, and then we had to look for new protagonists. And here you see Sasha, a trans man. This is actually in our studio in Czernivtsi. So this is where we interviewed him and Sofia, his girlfriend, his fiancée now, actually. And yeah, this is where we talked for hours with him. And in the very last interview, he revealed, look, I'm really depressed. I went to the doctor, and I really can't do this anymore. Let's just get, you know, let's just do it quickly. And I can't. I have a lot of problems, because they've been also living in this shelter in Czernivtsi for already, yeah, since the beginning of March. So just imagine, no privacy at all, and yeah, most of the time, these LGBTQI+ shelters are the only or safe place for sure. Because, for example, Olena Shevchenko was stressing the importance of these shelters, comparing to these open shelters for everybody. Like, you know, there is no security check, you know, there can be some violence or discrimination, so that's why those places are so important, and there are just a couple of them in Ukraine. This is Sasha decided to put like a patriotic tattoo, because this is also like very yeah, very, very common nowadays, like emphasizing, you know, I'm Ukrainian, and even, you know, the country doesn't see him as Ukrainian because he doesn't fit in the mainstream view. But this led us to another topic of nationalism, because I was like, I had like, you know, I always go to the field with open mind. Okay, let's see what we see. My time is out. You will not see anything else.
No, no.
It's my fault, I think.
Normally not.
But this is what, you know, after Vera told me, oh, I'm a nationalistic lesbian. And when Sasha was telling me, okay, I'm gonna do this, I don't know what's the name in English, but, you know, the thing from the flag, the symbol of Ukraine, he wanted to put it on his neck. And then we met a lot of like young progressive Ukrainians who were identifying themselves as nationalists. And then I was like, I thought that nationalists, those are people who are like very, you know, those people are excluding you. And you are also nationalistic. And this is when I started investigating more. And it turned out that there is like this rise of civic nationalism in Ukraine. So not ethnical nationalism, but nationalism in the way that more and more people starting identifying themselves with Ukrainian nation as a whole. Because you have this whole story, oh, Ukraine is divided, Russian-speaking East, Ukrainian-speaking West, but yeah, the reality is, of course, complex and turned out complex again. But I will not tell you more about that. If you want to know more, then you can read the pieces or talk to me later. And then to actually tell the whole story, also with a historical background about like the fight of LGBTQI+ community and the threat. I wrote this piece for Polish magazine, and the like shorter version of it was translated into several languages and published by Vox Europe, which I'm very happy about, because now you can read it in you know, languages which are like more widely spoken than Polish and Dutch. So like, if you want to know more about it in English, French, and German, Spanish, I think that I have it right with the with these initials, then yeah, and then do it. So to wrap it up, I would just tell you a few words about the process again. So we were looking for underreported stories in the first place. It was a long process. It's an ongoing process. We've been really desperate many times because, with the protagonists, it's a very sensitive topic. Not a lot of people want to talk about it because, it's war and, it's just not the time. Let's do it later. But for us, it was the right timing. Because it's been on for so many years already. So we've been working with vulnerable group during the war, so a lot of ethical stuff, ethical stuff like, should we push or should we talk again or should we convince, should we tell more about the project, because, people are really having their own problems, and then you ask them, give me your privacy, you will be a star. It was really, really difficult. And then we really had to abandon the idea of making documentary, because if your protagonists are depressed and you cannot make a documentary, we wanted to create this intimate image. And now we thought, okay, we've put a lot of work into it already. We will make like reportage video of it. So more explanatory, but also with life of people and not only like, them in the picture. So I actually wanted to show you a trailer of it, but we've been struggling with burnout and really fatigue last time, so OP didn't manage to make it, but maybe you just have to wait for the whole thing later, because after working in Ukraine, we also had another project with Fonds Pascal de Croos, which is like Flemish part of Journalism Fund, and we went to Lebanon. And there, we were, again, telling human stories, but the reality was pretty tough there as well. So altogether, it was a bit rough year. We also discovered a lot of new topics, like discrimination of Belarusian minority, like this civic nationalism, also a matter of cultural front, because through our protagonist we met like people from theater who are like protecting Ukrainian culture. So to be continued, let's say. And if you want to stay in touch, follow our work, please connect. And yeah, thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you. So as we have a few minutes left, if you have some question, please, it's time for it. Yes?
Yeah, I am researching at the University of Brussels, the cross-border and collaborative investigation project.
Just hold a second, you will receive the micro.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Better? Okay. Yeah, so I'm researching the mental well-being of investigative journalists working on topics like you guys do, which are very intense and sensitive most of the time. I think you're talking about war, about climate change, about LGBTQ rights and how people are mistreated. Do you have any thoughts on how it affects you personally and your work in order, or like as a result of that you work on such intense topics, and how does that affect your mental well-being?
maybe I will start because I already opened the topic. As like being in a country which is torn by war. Okay, we didn't go to the front because, as I told you, I'm not a war correspondent. But you know, being in a place where there is tension all the time. We didn't react to airstrikes because you know you don't go to the shelter. We just been once, like on the third day of war. And then you like start to kind of like get used to it, but you don't. And then you realize that you've been in a place where there was, you know, such tense atmosphere after you're back. And then I'm like, you know, there's no adrenaline, there are no deadlines, because most of the time I write a lot on the spot. And then, you know, there is this emptiness. It's like, what now? So like I've been in therapy for a year or something, and it helped me a lot, like in taking more distance from, you know, the protagonist, because what I also hear from friends, from family, always those heavy topics. They don't even want to know what I work on at the moment, because they know that it's gonna be something really not nice, just not nice. And it helped me, but at the same time not. Let's say, because you know I know that I'm coming back to Ukraine in 2 weeks, and I can't prepare myself because it's just tense. But at the same time, I cannot imagine doing something else because I, as a freelancer, I've been choosing my topics myself, so nobody told me, cover abortion ban in Poland, or go to those refugee camps and talk to people who were tortured in their countries of origin. Don't go to Lebanon, where the situation, is. You know, we went there to tell stories of people who still have energy to do something, but at the same time, you have to describe the situation. But the thing is, what I'm telling myself, that you know, at the end of the day, I'm coming back to a safe place, and those people, you know, stay there in unsafe situations. So I'm privileged. So there's also this narrative, like, you know, you have to pull yourself together because your life is good.
Thank you for the question. So I think the type of journalism that, or let's say the project that I've been working on with my colleague is quite different to this project that we just heard from. In the sense that it's not a documentary, it's not a reportage type journalism, and it doesn't necessarily involve human stories. So there's a lot of just looking into like how very big actors, companies, governments, political leaders, political parties are acting and are exploiting the crises that we're sort of going through. And I think one big thing, so it can be very stressful, of course, because there's a lot of bad stuff and bad news. And I think one of the most important things is to keep in mind why are you working on something? Why are we looking into this specifically? It can't just be, you know, because I want to report on climate change. Or it can be, but there has to be sort of like a bigger picture there. And, you know, in this, when you work with climate denial, climate delay, climate disinformation, one of the main questions that is behind this is, you know, why, even though there's such consensus on scientific consensus on climate change, why are we still so struggling so much with political action? And one of the answers that we can find is in looking at, how these big actors, because it is a systemic problem, so how these big actors are behaving to intentionally delay and obstruct climate policies and legislation. And especially when there are overlapping crises like this year, energy crisis, Russian invasion of Ukraine, climate crisis, all of these different crises that are overlapping, it can get quite complicated, and as a journalist, you can feel overwhelmed. But I think the important thing is to keep in mind, why are we doing this? And then, of course, detach as well, find time for yourself, find time for other things. And talk to other people that are in this, field of work. Talk to other journalists and sort of exchange information and experiences.
Thank you for your questions. Indeed, when you're scrolling a lot of the information that you have on Twitter, or when you're reading the news, you can be overwhelmed by the climate crisis, the war in Ukraine, and everything. So I get a little anxious too. A lot. But then I'm like, okay, I have to calm down and see what I can report. And as you told about the great actors like states and NGOs, so this is our job to report and to leave aside what we feel, I think.
Yeah, I felt inspired by what you said, and yeah, indeed, in those complex reality. It's so important to tell the stories, like coherent stories, explaining the all the layers of this complex reality, and this like taking a step back and be okay. I will not use the word being objective, but like try to tell the story. In a very like comprehensive way, not emotional way, or maybe that's the thing, because like for example, I've been like last weekend, I've been to Staphorst in the Netherlands, where there was lots of violence against people who protested against Zwarte Piet, which is a symbol for institutional racism. And I'm working on a story about this fight, which has been ongoing for almost 100 years already. And then I was really, I experienced violence. And then I'm like, okay, I need to wait a couple of days to calm down, to be able to, tell the story in a not sensational way, not like, the first krantenkop headlines are saying, like, like very quick journalism, okay, without even maybe understanding the situation, but okay, we have to put something because something has happened. But yeah, I think that's the power of also freelance journalism is that we can take our time, but to take our time we need money, which Journalist Fund is giving us. It's like, yeah, it's just really important for the quality of journalism, I think.
Thank you. Don't be afraid. Ah. Where? Here.
Hi, thank you for the panel and for all these amazing investigations that are very important. I had a question to Chloe. because you compared those different countries, and I was just curious to know, was there a country, I mean, you already said that Spain and Italy made better use of their funds than Cyprus did, but I was just curious to know, was there a country that stood out to you in terms of adaptation measures?
In terms of?
Adaptation measures that other countries could learn from, in that sense, because wildfires are prone to happen again, so.
I can you repeat, please? Sorry.
I was curious because you compared those different countries,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just curious to know, was there a country that stood out to you in taking measures for adaptation to wildfires that other countries could also learn from for the future?
What we found out, because I mean, you talk about the prevention. What we found out is like in each country, Spain, Italy, Greece, or Cyprus, the states put a lot of money to extinguish fires, but does not put money for prevention enough. So, and the experts and all the scientifics says that we have to stress to put more money on the prevention, and yeah. So I don't know if I answer, but it is the case for every country.
I think there is a question.
Hi, I'm a journalist from Lille in France. It's a question for you, Claudia. I would like to know, how do you help journalists with the diffusion of these investigations in Europe, and how do you pay them also?
So how do we pay them? So we have the different grant programs. So it's up to the grant program. So we are like the working grant and the grant for expenses. So once you are applying for the program, we are not evaluating your proposal. It's the jury who does it. So actually it's up to the jury if your project will be funded or not. And then how we help them, we have, for example, right now, the manager for the dissimulation. So we are trying to help the project with the whole communication strategy and then with the whole dissemination. So we are contacting the media outlets, we have the contact. And usually if you're applying for our program, you should have at least 2 letters of intent already, and then once you are granted, we are helping with the dissimulation by contacting them with the media outlet as well. All right, I don't know if there's still some questions or not. I left some flyers so if never you would like to know more about the Journalist Fund or about the funding opportunities, I left some flyers there so you can grab them. And if you have still some questions for girls, then don't hesitate. If not, it was really nice to have you all here. Thank you for coming.